So I'm here today with Shari, who will be familiar to Grail Country folks, as she's a regular. And we have joining us today Christina. Christina. It's what is your? I gotta say, your surname says it's Heil. It says Heil Null.
I saw that.
Well, it's Christina Hendricksen, but at one time she was Christina Heil because Christina and I were married at one time,
That's
and Christina's a
why the
wonderful person.
name keeps cracking
Christina's
me
a
up.
wonderful person, but it's a bad idea for poets to be married to poets, as history will tell. So we're much better off as friends. So and both Christina and Shari are poets. So that's
I'm a wannabe poet.
You, yeah, you don't get to say that.
Thank you.
No, I mean you don't get to say that. Like if you like any like I think that like you have a poetic way of looking at the world, and you're a natural poet. So don't let some like arbitrary standard of like how many how many journals have published your poetry or something like that determine whether you're a poet or not. Um, um, and that, well, especially in light of some of the things I'll end up saying in the course of this conversation. But what we decided would be cool to talk about today is that Shari and I had had an exchange about a month ago where we were talking about how poetry and prayer have so many overlapping similarities, and we thought it would be really good to have a discussion about like the overlap between poetry and prayer. And like we talked about, we first mentioned having this discussion like about a month ago, and then various scheduling conflicts and whatnot, we didn't get around to having it until now. And in and while we were waiting to actually find a time that would work to have the conversation, I actually I read Michael Martin's book Incarnation of the Poetic Word, and I just kind of wanted to there's a quote from that book that just really gets to the heart of, and my Kindle decided to like not
Crash.
cooperate with me. Well, it didn't crash, it just like decided to like fast forward past the part that I had marked. Where is it at? Oh, it went all the way to the end. Well, I'm not going to open with that quote, but and interestingly, I was going to open with a quote, but essentially, to paraphrase what Martin says, well, really kind of what he points to throughout the book, but like it culminates in this statement that I thought was particularly on point, and he points out to the communal and sacramental nature of poetry, because the way poetry functions, there's a communication between the spirit of the poet, or the genius of the poet, and the reader. And in a really good poem that really points toward being, it actually can like fully, it can actually become like fully communal and sacramental in like in pointing you toward the ground of being. For example, like Simone Weil's like conversion to Christianity was like brought about by the act of translating the George Herbert poem Love One.
Oh wow.
She actually had like a mystical encounter with Christ through the act of translating that poem. So so the poetry, and also poetry is naturally contemplative, just like prayer. Like it doesn't actually, poetry doesn't really, you can't interact with poetry unless you're in a contemplative mode, I would say. So that's kind of like what.
Go ahead.
Christina, go ahead.
Oh, I just said, the tradition is to read it aloud as well,
Right.
like you would a prayer. The oral tradition, I
Right.
think, plays into that prayer idea too.
Right. Right. And I don't know about you guys, but even when I'm reading poetry to myself, I tend to read it out loud. Like there's not like a poem, you can't really like, it has to be
It becomes
breathed
something
for
else.
you to get a full sense of it. Which makes it a very, it's a particularly embodied art form that way. Like, probably dance is the most embodied art form, but it's like, it's very, but it's like, I would almost argue that poetry is more embodied and participatory than dance, even because poetry actually actuates more parts of your being because your intellect is still involved too.
Well, I would add to that, or maybe push back a little bit, because I think that dance is poetry.
Well, I think that, right. Well, I think all art forms have a proper poetic mode, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of poesis, like, which is the
Yeah.
root of poetry for sure. Yeah. And I'm not like, the focus is on poetry too, but I would say that the artist's activity, when done well and in the proper spirit, all art has the potential to be active communion, a sacramental act, if it's done in a proper spirit.
I read something yesterday, actually, during the chat on Paul's Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of taken by the idea of what the soul is in Judaism.
Right.
And I was talking to Jacob about it a little bit in the chat, and I went digging, and I ran across this, which I wasn't thinking about this conversation when I read it, but it came to mind later, because in Judaism, there's this, what they call the additional soul. The additional soul is what you receive on Shabbat. And it's an expression of a higher love for God. So I just want to read this short thing here. It says, it is a love for God that transcends intellect. It is not based on logic, but is an expression stemming from a deep will and desire for God that is beyond reason. Just as a person's will to live is not based on reason, but is rooted in his inner depths, so too this unbounded love for God is an expression of the deepest part of a person, the essence of his soul. This deep and unbounded love for God is the experience of our additional soul on Shabbat. Mm-hmm. And I think well,
I would say there's something Sophianic about that, especially when you combine it with the Jewish notion of the Sabbath Queen, which is clearly like a very Sophianic idea.
Right. And Shabbat to me, I mean, maybe I have this wrong, but in my mind anyways, it's the garden and it's the Perusia, right? Like it's the it's the place of rest, right?
That's right. Yeah. The peace of God.
Right. And so, like, I don't know about you guys, but oftentimes when I'm writing a poem, I've described it as something that comes from underneath. Mm-hmm. And he says, it says here that it is an expression stemming from a deep will and desire, is rooted in the person's inner depths, right? And an expression of the deepest part of the person. So it actually is.
Do you think about that? Do you remember? Okay, it's funny that you were asking that question, but do you remember the quote that I asked? That I asked Paul about in the Q&A, and the question I asked him, where he was just like, he didn't even want to touch it. Do you remember?
I don't remember the quote.
Okay, so hold on a second. Well, I'll find it later. But it was a quote from Jean-Luc Marion, and essentially it was talking about how like grace is the ultimate object of the will.
Yeah,
is what he was saying, like in the quote. Like that's like, and then I'm like, and I in my follow up to the quote, I suggested that this actually aligns well with Maximus the Confessor's distinction between the natural will, which always longs for God, and the gnomic will, which is our just like our
Yeah,
will that chooses between like
deliberates. Yeah.
the deliberative choosing will, whereas the natural will is always oriented toward God. And so that to me seems to be like directly connected to the idea that you were just talking about,
Well, what's
because it's like
interesting to me about this?
and I
Sorry.
also, if you mentioned in that conversation in the comments, I was I don't know if anybody noticed it, but I was actually saying that, like, I would say that the spirit always belongs to God, right? Because that's the part that is directly comes from God. It's breathed into Adam.
Mhm.
It's the soul and the body that need restoration, right? So
Well, according to
and
the,
that's exactly what we eat in the elements
yeah,
of the sacrament. Like we eat the body and blood,
well, like I sat
which is
with this.
associated, and blood is associated with soul in pretty much in Judaism and every other really ancient tradition. It's still it's attached to the idea of the animating soul or life force of a living creature.
Right. What spoke to me about this, because it kind of, when I read about it, I liked it, and it resonated with me, and then it just kind of kept talking to me through the day. And I feel like when I'm writing poetry that I'm actually meeting this additional soul.
Right. Yeah.
First time.
Well, yeah, that's the other
Right?
part of the Marion quote is like it was like it's both connected to like this longing for grace, and it's also like the connection to the intimate stranger, right?
Yeah. Yeah. To your own self. Like, like oftentimes, I don't know, I'm sure oftentimes when I write a poem and read it back to myself, I'm like, oh, I'm enlightened about myself.
Right.
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 Right. There's this other aspect to poetry that is also, I think, sacramental, in that you, like what I just described, and also as a reader, you experience epiphany when you read poetry.
Yeah, that's right. And in fact, I think that was like, if I recall, that conversation around like how every really good poem has this like sense of epiphany contained within it. I think that was like kind of what we were both talking about, that kind of like sparked this whole like poetry prayer connection for us to start talking
I
about
would
it.
agree, but I noticed doing some reading for this and some research, the epiphanies come in different places at different points in your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yes. No, this is right, because but this goes back to what I said at the beginning about how reading poetry is inherently participatory, right?
Mhm.
And it's like you're not going to like, it's not like you're gonna like, I got like, when I like before we started, I was reading a couple of Malcolm Guite poems that I've read before, and it's like I got something new out of them in that reading when I was reading them and sharing that poetry with you. It's like there is like a really really good poem. It's like it, it's actually kind of amazing how I mean, it almost can't ever exhaust what it's disclosing to you if it's a really great poem.
I listened to a conversation between three men. They were talking about George MacDonald's unspoken sermons, and which to me are very poetic in nature and usually close with a prayer.
Yeah.
And they were saying that, and these guys were all in their, late 50s, early 60s, or even late 60s. And they said, you're going to get something new out of it every time you read it, depending on when in your life and where in your life. Right. And that's always those are always the two, what do you call those? Well, let's just say things. It's easy.
It's okay. You can say things.
Can I say things?
The only reason I objected to the use of thing in that context is that it was being predicated of God implicitly, and that
I know.
me. That's why I pushed back on that.
There was something yesterday, Christina, that we're referring to. The use of the word thing. Yeah.
which would have been fine, except for he was talking about God without talking about God, without wanting to use the word God and then referring to God as a thing.
Yeah.
Like I was having none of that. So
I was desperately trying to mediate you guys there.
yeah. It was fine. It was fine.
No, it was good.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Mark's a good guy.
He is. Yeah. He's trying. That's all we
is.
can ask for.
He had me send him a Bulgakov essay recently, actually.
Did you?
Yeah, I sent him. And actually, I didn't get it. It's actually, the irony is that I wanted to read that essay before this talk, because the essay is, it's not a Bulgakov essay. It's an essay about Bulgakov's work, by Ryan McDermott, I think is the author, and it's called Poetry Against Evil. It's the title. So it's like, I wanted to read it before this, but it's like, I didn't have the time to read both that and.
It kind of touches on a little touchy subject that we've been dealing with too.
Yeah, I just, I had a previous conversation this morning at 6:00 that went for over 2 hours with Chris, actually.
Oh, cool.
So I'm sure you'll see that whenever he decides to put it out. But
yeah,
I thought it was, I think it was good.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it.
Well, I'm desperately curious about Christina's poems. Can we hear one?
Do you have a poem that you want to share that you think has a prayer-like quality? And it doesn't have to be yours. I mean, it can just be like a favorite poem.
I would like to.
You're a great reader of poetry too, so.
Well, the poems I was going through of my own, I left at work. So Nathan, if you think of something, throw it out and I'll read it.
Actually, one of my favorite, honestly, I don't know. I really like this poem, and I don't know off the top of my head. It's one of my favorite poems of yours. I don't really know if it has a prayer-like quality. We can have you read it and see, but I really like Arkansas Traveler.
I would like to posit that all poems have a prayer-like quality.
Even Bukowski?
That's what I discovered.
Even Bukowski. Yes.
You're right, because I agree with you, and here's why. I agree with you here, and here's why. And I don't think Martin would necessarily agree with this, but I might push back on him on this when I talk to him, because it's like, you got to remember that not all prayers come from a place of reverence, right? Sometimes we play angry prayers. Sometimes we pray confused prayers. Sometimes we pray like lost prayers, and so it's like, there's always something in a poem, even when it's like, it's not a poem of adoration. It may not be a poem of adoration, right? It may not be a poem of adoration, but it still can have the qualities of a prayer.
Of course,
because it's still looking to establish a link to being.
A conversation with being.
A conversation with being. Exactly. That's exactly the right way to put it, Shari.
Yeah.
Well said. Yeah.
Well,
if you want some more time to look, I can kind of I can share the poem that I.
Here.
No problem. You got one for us to do today, Shari, right?
I've got a whole pile of them here. I could bore you.
Great. I didn't know we were doing our own. I got a couple of Malcolm Guite poems that I was going to read, but now I got to see. Now I got to look and see if I have any poems that I think are prayer-like.
Right?
They're all prayer-like.
They're all prayer-like. Yeah, you've already established that. Okay, now I might want to.
Me license to read.
Now I might want to read one of my least prayer-like ones, just to test our
theory.
Test our theory.
Yeah, I really had a difficult time not seeing every poem I read as a prayer of some sort.
Yeah, I really do kind of think to me that's especially if you accept Shari's definition, which I'm inclined to agree with, that poetry represents an attempt to communicate with being.
I think that should be the title of this talk: a conversation with being.
A conversation with being. I think I'm with you on that. So, you find it yet?
You know what? I'll read one. You
go first. Yeah, you go first.
Read an
old
more time.
All
While
right.
Christina's looking, hang on a second. I'm gonna turn on light on here. I don't know, I'm getting old. Longer time goes on, the less I can see.
I know the one I'm going to read. But I'll let you go first.
Okay, so like I said, these two here, I never edited them. So they're just like straight out of the old noggin.
No problem.
The roses stand wilted in the vase, the memory of their beauty but a breath. The suitcases stand empty like a gaping grave, beckoning me on to death. The curtains hang heavy like a head in shame. I cry out softly in this state of mine. Silent screams to alleviate the pain, thrashing gestures in pantomime. I rise up early, I rise up in the morning light. My arms swing to the rhythm of the daily bread. My feet carry me quickly to the night, and all the while I feel I'm dead. So I wait upon you, Lord. I long for you to turn the ashes to beauty, create and renew. Till I lay down my head, yet promising nothing, for I wish to be led.
Yeah, that's definitely a prayer. 100% for sure. So
Yeah.
are you still looking, Christina? I can read one to buy you time if you're still looking.
Unfortunately, I am.
Okay. All right. So this one might be well, I'll let you guys decide what it is. But this is it's called Epitaph for a Sinner. A pretty
Is
good
this
cook.
yours?
Yes, is mine, yeah. Epitaph for a Sinner.
Okay.
A pretty good cook who knew his way around the Escoffier classics, but wasn't shy about using Velveeta in his Tex-Mex and lived for barbecue. A man equally at home with Arthurian legends and tales of outlaws, who was comfortable rattling off the deeds of Sir Tristan and Sir Lancelot as he was the deeds of Jesse James or Billy the Kid, and saw no contradiction, or if he did, didn't seem to mind much about it. A man who couldn't sleep without white noise, but snored like a steam shovel. A man who loved the Gospels but hated rules, who never said no to a second helping or a second round. A sinner who never went in much for church, but loved the old hymns. A man who took himself too seriously most of the time, but wasn't too proud to laugh like a donkey and mostly at himself.
Nice. Is that a prayer? That's the question.
Yeah, is it? If I test it, is it a prayer? You guys,
Yeah.
you guys be the judge.
Thinking. I think it is.
I do
I think
too.
it is. I think it's a prayer for my own soul, actually.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
It's a, yeah. Yeah. The mirror is, when you hold up a mirror, the mirror is ultimately God, right? Like that's what you're doing.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
A communication with being. Did I do it okay?
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. We
I
all
gave
do
it my
okay.
best shot. I hope it's good enough. You still looking, Christina?
Yes, your sister didn't manage to remember to get a copy of my book from Liz, and the rest are in storage. So, but
Oh,
I can read something that's not mine and keep looking.
yeah, but do that. Just if you have a favorite poem that you want to read, or
Mhm.
actually, so you can keep looking, I can share one of the Malcolm Guite poems that I had in mind.
Okay.
That says, let's like, okay, this is the title poem from Malcolm Guite's The Singing Bowl. This one is like pretty obviously a prayer. Singing Bowl. Begin the song exactly where you are. Remain within the world of which you're made. Call nothing common in the earth or air. Accept it all and let it be for good. Start with the very breath you breathe in now, this moment's pulse, this rhythm in your blood, and listen to it, ringing soft and low. Stay with the music. Words will come in time. Slow down your breathing. Keep it deep and slow. Become an open singing bowl whose chime is richness rising out of emptiness and timelessness resounding into time. And when the heart is full of quietness, begin the song exactly where you are.
Mm. That reminds me of this other one that I have here.
Oh, go for
actually.
it. Yeah, go for it. I also want to
It's
grab.
also
I also want to do a counter example. I want to read an actual prayer that I think has poetic qualities.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go grab a copy
yeah.
of Carmina Gadelica, which is a collection of old Scottish folk prayers that was gathered by a 19th century folklorist. So Shari, go ahead. I was just gonna.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay,
I meant for you to
so
keep reading. I wanted you to
one-
read to give me time to look.
Sorry. This one was also just thrown out onto the paper, so it's never been dealt with. So you have to give me a lot of grace for it. Alone and swinging, swinging and alone, feet scuffing up the dirt, heels digging into the dirt. Alone and swinging, swinging and alone. A hollow emptiness, not a thought, not one. A presence, breathing, unsteady, unknowing. Without lifting your head, without thinking a thought, you are sure of one thing. You are alone and swinging, swinging and alone.
Very nice. I can almost turn at random in this book, which I basically have done, because like basically all the prayers, all of these old prayers kind of have that quality. This is called the new moon. Hail to thee, thou
Is this
new
from
moon.
Scottish?
Yeah, this is from Carmina Gadelica, which is this was a folklorist gathered these like kind of folk prayers, and it's not all prayers, but there are prayers and blessings and but they're just kind of like gathered. They're just yeah prayers and blessings of the folk from Scotland that I mean it was collected in the 19th century, but they probably go back a lot further. Actually, these are actually better. There's some prayers for animals here that are really fascinating. There's a well, here you go. Since you're, I'll get this is this one is interesting because you also raise sheep. So this is called Seine for sheep. The seine placed by Mary upon her flock of sheep, against birds, against dogs, against beasts, against men, against hounds, against thieves, against polecats, against marten cats, against eye, against envy, against disease, against Gobain. In the hollow of your meeting, be yours the aiding of God. On the hillock of your lying, whole be your rising. Just like a blessing to say over the flock.
Nice.
Yeah.
Can you read it one more time?
I have to find it again.
Oh shoot.
No,
Okay.
actually, I got lucky. I'm actually
Okay,
pretty
good.
close. I'm actually pretty close to it. Yeah. It had some Gaelic in there that I probably butchered.
I didn't notice.
There was at least one word that was like untranslated Scots Gaelic. And I am not even going to attempt to do Scots dialect because that, although Kenny could do it.
He can, yeah.
He can. He does it really quite well. That's never the thing. Oh, come on. Here we go. Saying for sheep. The seine placed by Mary upon her flock of sheep, against birds, against dogs, against beasts, against men, against hounds, against thieves, against polecats, against marten cats, against eye, against envy, against disease, against Gaban. In the hollow of your meeting, be yours the aiding of God. On the hillock of your lying, whole be your rising.
Wow. On the hillock of your lying, whole
Yeah,
be your rising.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, right, right. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, and that's
Yeah.
just like, that's like just like some peasant shepherd's little blessing over their flock to protect their flock.
Totally. And it's totally poetic.
Totally poetic. Yeah, exactly. Like every single, almost basically everything in this book is. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, when people talk about like the bardic spirit of the Celtic people, this you can really see like how it's just like, it's not just in the music and poetry, it's in the daily lives.
Yeah.
Like these are regular prayers that people would say like in their daily lives, and it's just like it's permeates it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you find
Christina, you have to have found something by now.
yeah. I actually, I might actually, I think I might have some of yours actually.
Well, I can read a Rumi poem.
Okay, you read a Roman poem, and
Yeah.
I'll see if I can find some of yours.
Hear it.
I know I have some of yours
I
in.
know I'm like thumbing through my phone from my old WordPress right now, trying to find Arkansas Traveler, and the search button isn't working, and I left all my notes.
I might have a copy in my email. Hold on a second. That's the good thing about Gmail. It archives everything forever.
Yeah, I know. That's really great.
This is Rumi. Look at love.
Okay.
Look at love, how it tangles with one fallen in love. Look at spirit, how it fuses with earth, giving a new life. Why are you so busy with this or that or good or bad? Pay attention to how things blend. Why talk about all the known, all the unknown? See how unknown merges into known?
Mm.
I think separately of this life and the next when one is born from the last. Look at your heart and tongue. One feels but deaf and dumb. The other speaks in words and signs. Look at water and fire, earth and wind, enemies and friends all at once. The wolf and the lamb, the lion and the deer, far away yet together. Look at the unity of this spring and winter manifested in the equinox. You too must mingle, since the earth and the sky are mingled just for you and me. Be like sugar cane, sweet, silent. Don't get mixed up with bitter words. Your beloved grows right out of your own heart. How much more union can there be?
Wow.
Okay, Christina, I just sent you an attachment that has like one of the documents in here is like has over almost 8,000 words of your poetry.
Okay.
And also Arkansas Traveler is a separate attachment as well. So
Thank you.
you're welcome.
You know what I love about that what you
Does any,
just read Christina,
oh yeah, go ahead.
was all the dualisms. Like we've been talking about this in this group that Nate and I are part of. I think it was Jess that brought that up, Nate. What do you mean by dualisms, and why are you demonizing them? He had a hard time with that. And I think that poem that she just read actually illustrates why you shouldn't demonize them. Like because it's through the dualism, the night and the day, the earth and the sky, all the things that they're talking about, that it's like the yin and the yang, right? And you've got this line in the middle, and that's what you're looking for, and you can't see that unless you have two contrasting images.
But when people say that, they're not telling you not to see differentiation. What they're saying is that you need to see the unity beyond the differentiation. You have to see You have to see
Yeah.
the multi-unity.
Right.
And right, yeah. So that's
But-
I think
but,
that's
you know,
all.
but-
That's what when I'm talking when I'm railing against dualism, that's what I mean.
Right. You're railing against the lazy way of looking at the world, which is just to
Right.
see the two contrasting images.
Right,
like,
just to see the two
there they
contrasting
are.
images and not to see the
But
interconnectedness.
You're not
Yes,
looking. You're not looking for that place where they can join.
correct.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
but at the same time, you need the dualisms in order to see that place where they can join.
Sure.
You have to have the two contrasting things. So, you know, like I've had this question for you know, a long time about the body. Like why this body? Why do I need to be in this body, in this world, this fragile, easily maimed and, you know, tormented body, right? In a world that is actually quite can be violent to my body, like my physical body, right? And it's the same question. You could pose the same question about dualism. Why do we have to have these? Why do we have to have night and day? Why do we have to have lion and lamb? Well, because you need to look beyond.
What if the reason you have a body is so that God has a body?
I know, still not that. You're not getting. Nobody gets my question.
Well, I don't. That's probably like a little bit different than the standard answer you get, though.
Yeah. No, I know that. Like, I know. Yeah.
Because
There's
it actually it scandalously suggests that God has a lack or a need. That there's something that God doesn't have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That the creation,
but
the material creation is genuinely other to God.
Yeah.
And in relation to God.
What I'm saying is I'm fascinated with what it is weakness and strength, really. That's the thing, right?
Right.
That's what you're looking at. Like the weakness in dualism is the trap of falling into it.
Right.
The strength of it is to see where it joins. It's like field and forest, right?
To see beyond it to the unity.
Right, like the field and the forest.
Right.
It's at the edge of the field and the forest where most life is found.
I would say the utility of it is that it points to the fact that basically that you need to hold things in polar tension. It points to the fact that they're a multi-unity, that there is unity and differentiation at the same time.
Of course. Yeah. But it also presents a trap, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
But so does hyper focus on just the kind of a flat monism does too.
Which is what our body does. Our body can be used to glorify God, and it can also present a trap to us, right? It's full of passions. Like we're constantly confronted with these two seemingly opposing things, right? But it's that in between space that I like to talk about. Yeah. That's where we need to be, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I just went on.
Did you find that was wonderful, Shari? Thank you.
Yeah.
Did you find it?
I did.
All right.
Okay. Arkansas traveler. He hung up. I set the phone down and walked over to adjust the crooked curtains hanging in the kitchen window, glass of sweet tea in hand, when they began to tremble. They were the first and last things I ever quilted. Quilts are best left to experts, the deft seamstresses, the ones who persevere through the twisting burrs and blocks, not those who curse and argue with the twisted thread and whimper at the needle's repetitive, pernicious pricks. They never did hang quite right. They're unevenly matched. And the pretty, pale fabric has no business in a kitchen of mine. I make messes of pale things. I splatter, I splash, I stain. I stitched them together one morning when I was pregnant with some fabric I found in the cedar trunk at the foot of our bed. I was cleaning, organizing, making more room for more superfluous stuff when I discovered the old paper bag with the word sis written on it in thick black letters. It was Granny's handwriting. I knew because of how the letters leaned slightly to the right, like an apple tree in an orchard that the planter forgot to stake and tie, like mine. And because the I in sis was written in lowercase, even though the S's were capitalized. And because sis was what Granny always called Mama, not just when she was a child, but always, even after she was married, even after she had 5 children, even as she lay still and quiet, her right shoulder distorted, arm at an ugly angle, under the other side of paradise quilt, slowly sucking her final breaths while my mom looked down on her, simultaneously stricken with grief and relieved, hand in hand. I opened the bag and pulled out the folded fabric. I unrolled the links of pink and white gingham, the carnation. Granny didn't go into much for color, but she loved pink, wild Irish rose pink, the faint pink of seed pearls, the pink lip of a conch shell. I cut out the squares and spent all morning sewing them together on the Singer featherweight that Granny gave Mama, that Mama gave back to Granny when she bought a fancy new machine, and that Granny gave to me upon graduation from high school. Taking down the white metal rod and threading it through the tops of the curtains, I wondered how long it would take him to notice. Would he come home from work, hang up his coat, walk in the kitchen, turn to the sink to wash his hands and just see them suspended there on display? Or would it take a few days? Maybe in the middle of the night, he'd have a headache and be fumbling around in the kitchen for aspirin and a glass of water and glance over at the window in some ancient primal ritual, a beast seeking moonlight for a sign, a message, a cue. And there they would be, my curtains, my shrouds of love. Maybe it would take years. I'd wait anxiously at first for him to discover. I would drop subtle hints and then less subtle ones. My secret hurt would churn, and he would wonder if it was fluctuating hormones or some accidental slight spoken over supper or just the blues. He'd wonder why I wouldn't just come out and say what the matter was. The fresh pink would fade to a dirty light brown from too much exposure to sunlight, a grease fire. Okay, 3 grease fires, and a debacle with broken gravy. Eventually, even I forgot about the curtains until we were moving, until he hung up the phone, frustrated, and I searched the kitchen one more time for a missed nail, a spot of mildew overlooked. I took a slow sip of tea and saw them tremble slightly as the earth's patchwork pieces pulled in differential motion. I remember the beginning and the end. I can't say for sure what happened in the in-between. Only a seismologist, an expert in fault lines and seismic waves could say. For me, there was only the tremble, a quick intake of breath, and then the looking down at the broken glass in my hands.
Wow.
Yeah, she's good.
That was long. I didn't realize how long it was.
Yeah, it's a prose poem, and but it's really good. That's I think my all-time favorite poem of yours. It's really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful. Really beautiful. Love it.
Thank
It reminds me of the movie with Winona Ryder called How to Make an American Quilt. Have you seen it,
I
Christina?
haven't.
Oh my
I have not
gosh.
seen it. Okay.
Now you're gonna have to watch
honestly-
it.
You're
I
not-
actually, yeah, I watched it on Shari's advice, and I watched it with the whole family, and we all liked it, even Kenny and Ella.
Great.
So,
Okay.
yeah,
It's like
Yeah.
a poem. It's like a poem. The
yeah.
whole movie.
Okay.
Mhm. I think anyway.
There's that line near the end about only like remembering the beginning and the end and not the in between. That's a powerful line,
Hmm.
and that's definitely a prayer. That's a prayer for the alleviate. That is a prayer for apokatastasis. That's what that is. It's like that's yeah. It's a prayer for the restoration of all things.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Right there in that poem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So does anyone have like I mean, other than the little blessing over the sheep that I read from?
I've got some Rilke.
Okay,
Want to hear some Rilke?
sure.
I could just read all of them because they're all prayers. I mean, this is actually called
Yeah.
Love Poems to God, right? So let me just see. I've got a couple saved here. Oh, here, you'll love this one, Nate. Wer seines Lebens viele Widersinne. He doesn't title any of his poems. He just puts the first line as the title.
Yeah.
Um,
I used to. I'm good at titling, so I used to help Christina pick her titles because I'm actually pretty good at it. But there are poets who are poets. Some poets don't bother. Some poets are good at it, and
some poems. Yeah. I don't like rules, and
right,
so,
right.
So some people say you have to have a title, and I'm like, what? Okay, I'm out. You know, I don't have to have anything. You know, that's me, right?
Yeah.
But I'm just like, well, Rilke didn't, and that's the end of the argument for me.
Well, I mean, I would say that the argument for, I would say the argument for the first line just being the title is that, like, when you read a poem out loud, like, the title is part of the poem. So it's like, why not just cut to the chase and just make the first line the title, right? Because you're going to read it out loud anyway.
Okay, so this is it. His poetry is all, I mean, at least here is really short. She who reconciles the ill-matched threads of her life and weaves them gratefully into a single cloth. It's she who drives the loudmouths from the hall and clears it for a different celebration, where the one guest is you in the softness of evening. It's you she receives. You are the partner of her loneliness, the unspeaking center of her monologues. With each disclosure, you encompass more, and she stretches beyond what limits her to hold you. I'll read it again.
Go for it, Shari.
She
the spirit moves.
She who reconciles, I'm like goosebumply all over the place. She who reconciles the ill-matched threads of her life and weaves them gratefully into a single cloth. It's she who drives the loudmouths from the hall and clears it for a different celebration. Where the one guest is you, in the softness of evening, it's you she receives. You are the partner of her loneliness, the unspeaking center of her monologues. With each disclosure, you encompass more, and she stretches beyond what limits her to hold you.
Beautiful.
That's just crazy. Like, someone can do that with words.
Right.
There
was yeah, that's like, there was, so I started reading part of that essay on about Bulgakov and poetry that was called Poetry Against Evil, and I kind of skimmed it, but there was this one section that was really interesting where it essentially talked about how difficult the poetic labor is, and how essentially the poetic project is to attempt to recover the Adamic language, like to restore, like, so which connects poetry directly to the repair of the world.
Yes.
Right? If that's what poetry is doing, is to trying to is if it's an attempt to communicate directly with being, and it's an attempt to recover the Adamic language, then poetry in its proper mode, obviously, is actually actively engaged in the repair of the world.
Well, this is what I loved about this Rilke poem, because to me, she is wisdom.
Yeah.
And she who reconciles the ill-matched threads of her life and weaves them gratefully into a single cloth. That's reconciliation, right? Right.
Well, and there's something inherently Sophianic about poetry, in my opinion, because it's because you can't write poetry unless you're looking for the splendor that shines through, like, even and it's the thing about poetry too, is it can find that splendor in the strangest of places too.
Yes, but there's a definite there's a focus and meditation that happens too, where you're looking at the forest, but you're seeing the smallest dewdrop on the smallest leaf and focusing
Right.
on that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which,
And yes, it's full attention. Yeah, exactly.
And you're seeing it in the context of the forest, right? Of the whole thing.
Mhm.
Which is like, it seems like it's almost trying to do the impossible.
Yes.
Which is why it's so dang
Well,
hard.
that's exactly what Christina's poem does.
Yeah, I know.
She weaves in, like he says here, she's reconciling the ill-matched threads of her life and weaving them gratefully into a single cloth.
Yeah.
That's what she's doing,
Yeah.
you know, in that poem that she read.
Yeah.
Because it's a, you know, a smattering of memories, right?
Right.
That-
Yeah.
that-
And they're
that
like, they're not
come
all good
together.
either. It's like,
But they all come together to bring a revelation or an
right.
epiphany.
And I really think the soul of that poem is that like, so it ends in a line that suggests an acceptance of death, right? But and immediately prior to that, it expresses a hope for the restoration of all things. Like in spite of the fact that like there's a clear like the voice in the poem there's a clear brokenness to the voice of the poem, yet that voice still looks forward to the restoration of all things, and then is resigned to it fully accepts their own death, maybe in a yeah. So it's like it's really.
Well, I mean, the whole idea of quilt is to stitch pieces together, right? That's what you're doing.
Right.
You're taking pieces of various fabric and you're stitching them all together to make a cloth. Like
which is kind of like that's what poetry is doing too, right? It's like you're taking these crappy tools that you have, right? And you're trying to stitch together. Well, what are you trying to stitch together? Ultimately, being. You're
stitching together seemingly disparate things. Like,
right.
This is the thing. Like, this is what I'm talking about when I say, you know, because of this dualistic way that, you know, the lazy way of looking at the world is dualism, right? So you see all the pieces, but the poet shows you that they actually all belong together.
Right.
Like they need to come together in order for you to see the whole picture properly.
Yeah.
I don't know about either of you, but it's a very meditative, almost virginal act. And the less I'm in intellectual control of it, the better it tends to go. I need to get to that space where I'm accepting something and letting it flow through me.
Yes.
The muse. That's why this is why there's always been talk about the muse. Like that's yes.
Well, it's like, a channel. It's definitely a channeling exercise, I find. You know, when you're really doing it right, it's a canonic activity. Like it really is. It's like you have to get out of the way of the poem that wants to be born through you. You just do. If you try to get in its way and you try to control it and manipulate it, you're going to come out with, it's going to be a crappy poem. Mm-hmm. Or it might be an artfully done, clever poem, but it won't be one of those poems that really like does the kind of thing we're talking about. Magic. What was that? So what do you think of this statement then, in light of what you were just talking about, Christina? I watched this really great documentary on Bukowski. He's in it, like, you know, it's just kind of like an evening with him. And there's this journalist from Italy, I think. Anyway, and she goes, "Well, can we go see where you write your poetry? Can we go up there and look?" You know, it's just some sacred pilgrimage, right, to his typewriter. And so he's like, "Oh, okay," you know. So they go up to this room that he has, and she goes, "So this is it? This is where you write your poetry?" And he goes, "This is where I fuck myself."
Yeah. I mean,
right.
And I was just like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It is a turning inside out in a way, right?
Yeah.
And that's why, like, when I when
Well,
I
I mean, that's a really Bukowski-esque, like, and crude way to kind of express the same, that idea of like the stranger who's more intimate to you than you are to yourself. Like,
Yeah.
that's what Bukowski is. He's saying it in coarse language to
but it's
shock,
the,
but that's actually, but even that's done for effect, because
yes,
when people say things in a really coarse, crass way like that, like, they're,
it's
well, at least
poetic.
the way, in the spirit that Bukowski was doing it, he's like, you need to get a clue. So he's like trying to spark, like, just like a moment of like confronting this person with a genuine thought. And that's
Mhm.
why he expresses
Yeah.
it in that way.
But
And
there's a lot of truth
that can be
to
more
that.
effective than trying to be all philosophical about it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also a multifaceted thing to say. I mean,
Yes.
Yes.
this is where I fuck myself. This is where I fuck myself. This is where I fuck myself. Because writing poetry is a bit of fucking yourself. I mean,
Is that is I think YouTube doesn't allow profanity
I'm
for titles. I don't think so. No, I don't think that. No, I think it's
Oh, you
fine in
mean
the
for
video.
titles? No,
Yeah,
we're
it's
not
not
gonna
for
do
not
that.
for children. Yeah. No, if I can get away, maybe if I could put some asterisks or something, that could be the title of the.
You could think
title of the
about that
discussion.
statement for a long time.
yeah.
Yeah,
You could
right.
think about that
Exactly.
for a long
There's
time.
not. There's more going on there that meets the eye, which is what I wanted to call attention to. Is like, he's not just saying that to be gross and rude. Like, there's more going on with him
No.
saying that. He's actually trying to tell you something that's meaningful.
Well, this is the thing. This gets back to what I read about the additional soul, right? Like, you're actually encountering somebody that you never met before.
It's you.
That's how it feels to me. Oftentimes.
It's
Well, it's the ineffable
it's-
part of you,
it's
right?
the-
It's unknowable.
well, it's the you that you're becoming. Like, Bulgakov had this interesting idea
Yeah,
that
and-
like
and-
that at the last judgment, like every soul is ultimately judged by itself, right? So it's like your own true, redeemed, elevated ego that stands in judgment over the parts of you that need to burn away. So
Sometimes, though, it's a very dark stranger.
sure.
You
Yes.
know.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I don't know how elevated that guy is, or woman. But yeah.
Didn't you write a poem about the love talker once, Christina? That just reminds me of the love talker motif in
Maybe
African American folklore. I could have
I
swore
was
you
going
wrote.
back to play, but I don't know.
Oh,
if I
maybe you
wrote-
did. Maybe it was a play. Yeah, I think it was a play. You did a play. Yeah, you did a play called Love Talker. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
That's right.
Do you want to hear another Rilke?
Yeah.
Please.
Hear it.
Okay.
I'm gonna refill my coffee, but I can still hear you.
Okay. I just want to make sure I don't look like a mad scientist when I take my glasses off. Okay. Why am I reaching again for the brushes? When I paint your portrait, God, nothing happens. But I can choose to feel you. On my senses horizon, you appear hesitantly like scattered islands. Yet standing here peering out, I'm all the time seen by you. The choruses of angels use up all of heaven. There's no more room for you in all that glory. You're living in your very last house. All creation holds its breath, listening within me, because to hear you, I keep silent. I'll read it one more time. Why am I reaching again for the brushes? When I paint your portrait, God, nothing happens. But I can choose to feel you. At my senses horizon, you appear hesitantly like scattered islands. Yet standing here peering out, I'm all the time seen by you. The choruses of angels use up all of heaven. There's no more room for you in all that glory. You're living in your very last house. All creation holds its breath, listening within me, because to hear you, I keep silent. Yeah. So I have a poem that's kind of like that.
You got one of yours that's like that?
Kind of. Not anything like that, but
Oh, well,
along that same,
it's yours.
yeah. It's called Waking Up Early. My cat wonders, why so early? Quick belly scratch, I heave the duvet off my warm body, cold air over my limbs, lifting me. The ritual begins. I think I'll find God in these early morning hours. I think he will join me as I shake off the weariness of the night, and I do. A puppy stares through the window, wondering. I wanted to see what she does while she waits. I wanted to be first. The sun woke her. I think they know him, they who rise with the warm rays and sleep with the silver of starlight. They who breathe in and out without a worry, unburdened. I see it in their eyes. They have no questions. They breathe in and out. I think if I rise early, he will speak to me. I think if I rise early, I will see the stillness of a house broken by revelation. I think if I rise early, there will be something waiting for me.
Wow.
All right, Christina, you gotta lay another one on us that you think has the kind of qualities we've been discussing. I sent you that document that has like a whole bunch of your poems. I don't know if you saw that one. It's just,
To me? Okay.
yeah, I'm talking to you.
No, I missed that. I was
I'm
still
talking.
thinking about Shari's poem. Sorry.
Well, that's okay. No, that's good.
Beautiful.
Thanks.
Your poems require contemplation, as we've already established in this
Yes.
conversation.
Yeah, they do. You have to let them sit there a little while.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see. Scarlet Runner.
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
You are not something lost, like my keys, my dignity, a phone number written in pencil on a white paper napkin. You're not predictable like moth to flame, not quiet like the sun hiding below the horizon, not shrouded like a red-brown seed nestled among the yellow flesh of an Alberta peach. You're not vespertine like witches' weeds. You fret and strum delicate arpeggios on the hungry side of town, so close, my lungs still fill with your breath when I sing. And then you vanish, always. I don't know how. Like a cloak of fog around a morning swamp willow, like the laughter of a little girl at play, like the red seeds of a scarlet runner bean tumbling from the split pod into the wooden pail. You freckle in the sun. I remember this and other things. I remember the way your fingers fidget when you're nervous, the red hair you tuck behind your ears, and how much, no matter who might miss you, you love to run.
Mm.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
What was it? What was your how did you summarize poetry earlier in the conversation? You said something about like a communication with being, right?
A conversation with
A
being.
conversation with being. Yeah, that's a conversation with being on like many levels. Like, and that and no, like, and it's always relational. Like it's always relational. Okay. All right. So I'll do one more of mine.
Okay.
We'll get. This is called Reflections in the Meat Department. Examining the factory processed and cryovac remains of your scions in the meat department, poking, bending to test for flexibility, not fully satisfied, but contemplating already what brines, rubs, or marinades to use this time, which fruit and nut woods to wed with your rosy pink flesh. Struck quite unexpectedly by the unfairness of it all, we both have been brought low. Once we met in the dark wood, I armed with a spear, you with your razor-sharp tusk, and an unconquerable will. You gave up your life to feed my village. We honored your death with a great feast and offered up prayers to the gods that you would return and we might meet again, but not like this. I never meant it to be like this. It is fated that neither you nor I will die in battle in this life, old friend. But I will wash your tender pink flesh and pat it dry ever so gently. Rub it with good olive oil, coarse salt, crushed fennel seed, and a little red pepper. Burn a fire of oak wood down to glowing embers. Give you a proper send off. To honor you, to honor the gods, I pray for your return. Maybe in the next life, the cycle of history will permit us to meet once again on more honorable terms.
Hmm.
Definitely a prayer.
Yeah, definitely a prayer.
Maybe masculine and pagan, but a prayer.
There's beauty in it. No.
I looked up some of George MacDonald's poetry and it's really bad.
Oh, really? That's so funny because that is really ironic because he has such a poetic sensibility.
I know, like his prose is way more poetic than his
Yeah.
poetry.
Yeah.
And actually, C.S. Lewis criticized his poetry as being meh, mediocre at best.
Right. Yeah.
But I thought I'm just gonna read one.
Okay.
Just to give you guys an idea. Maybe you can tell me what you think. It's called A Dream Song. I dreamed of a song, I heard it sung. In the ear of my soul, its strange notes rung. What were its words I could not tell, only the voice I heard right well. For its tones unearthly my spirit bound, in a calm delirium of mystic sound, held me floating alone and high, placeless and silent, drinking my fill of dews that from cloudless skies distill on desert places that thirst and sigh. 'Twas a woman's voice deep, calling to deep, rousing old echoes that all day sleep. In cavern and solitude, each apart, here and there in the waiting heart. A voice with a wild melodious cry, reaching and longing afar and high. Sorrowful triumph and hopeful strife, gainful death and newborn life. Thrilled in each note of the prophet's song. In my heart it said, O Lord, how long shall we groan and travail and faint and pray, ere thy lovely kingdom bring the day.
Yeah, it's too disembodied.
Right?
It's just too disembodied. It doesn't, it's not, yeah. That surprises me because his prose is so good.
I know. I had actually never looked at his poetry, but in lieu of this conversation, I thought I'm just going to see, what, because I remember Lewis saying that.
Yeah, it's too
structured.
It's too structured.
But you can have, I mean, there are great structured poems that still feel very very embodied, like John Donne, for example. I mean, like very embodied and very in touch.
Tons of them.
Yeah, right. So I mean, it's not the fact that it's structured. I mean, it's like it's that it's disembodied. I mean, that's ultimately what I would say. It's just disembodied. It's like
but I know what Christina's talking about. Like it's almost contrived. Like some of the rhymes,
right.
Some of the rhyming words are like, what rhymes with sung?
Right. It's not canonic. But let's put it that way. It's not canonic.
What's that?
There are some lovely lines.
There are. It's like, that's like, this is why it's like really, really difficult to write. Malcolm Guite impresses me because he's a poet who writes in form a lot.
Well, he
but yet still manages to be like so darn good.
Yeah, but Malcolm Guite really walks that line between bad poetry and good poetry sometimes. I think
that's true. I think that's true.
I think
yeah. But he has enough good ones that
he does.
That I mean, you gotta if you're taking tough shots, you can have some bad misses. That's how much.
Well, we all do, right?
Right. Yeah. That's the thing. Yeah, but that's like there's got to be a fear. Like I think it's funny. It's like one of the other things that triggered me in Pajot's Q&A the other day was like he has this like really, really like negative view of acting as an art form, and I'm like, and like to me, and he specifically critiqued method acting, right? But to me, it's like he said this weird thing about maintaining your like acting when it's done well, you maintain your center of identity. Like he's quoting Guénon, and like you can maintain your center of identity while like relating to the spokes or something like that. I mean, it's like no, I say that's actually what makes acting when acting is at its best and it's most beautiful is when it is like completely canonic and takes that risk. Like you're just dead wrong. And that's actually true of like not just acting but every other art.
Yeah.
Right.
Like
There's a
you
transcendence. Mhm.
have to let the artwork live through you, and for the actor their artwork is the role like
Mhm.
that. And it's like um
And the more
and
you
it
try to hold on to that ego or self, the less transcendent your art is.
right, and you can see it in the performances like and I mean it's not like I mean there's a lot of crummy acting but it's an art form just like any other when it's done well. And I
Mhm.
think it's done when it's done well is when it's at its most canonic. So that was just like give the actors a break. The one thing he did say that I agree with though, especially and you will appreciate this, Christina, is like why don't we celebrate the the writers, right?
Mhm.
And some of the other people involved as much as we do the performers, and that part of it
Well, many
I did
writers,
agree
many
with.
playwrights have been, not enough of them, but I'm thinking about Neil Simon, for example, right?
Yeah, but like I mean, yeah, true. I mean, but like um the average person, like if you ask them to name a playwright, how many playwrights they can be able to name?
Yeah.
And how many of them are contemporary?
Hmm.
Right. I mean, as far as contemporary, it's like there was a time when I could name you contemporary playwrights when but I don't think I could anymore. You know, I
I
don't think
think
I
a lot
can
of novelists are
I don't
really,
think I could name anybody more contemporary than Tom Stoppard, and that's probably like
I mean,
that's
I got a little disillusioned when I started buying, just out of curiosity. I never bought like the bestseller, paperbacks at the grocery store. And then out of curiosity, I did. I bought a couple, of John Grisham,
oh, okay.
and then I actually bought the Game of Thrones series
Yeah.
when before, like I think the first season had just started, and I thought, well, because of Lord of the Rings, I thought, well, I want to read the book before I watch the series, right? And I read the first book and watched the first season, and it was like word for word, word for word. Like the book was like the screenplay.
Until
Seriously.
right until they ran out of the books to work with, and then the show went
And
off the
and
rails.
then I was reading a John Grisham, and I'm like, geez, this is more like just dialogue.
Yeah.
Like all of the descriptive stuff is gone. Like there's no, like Lord of the
Yeah.
Rings, I mean, he's building worlds, right?
Right.
And you're taken off into this, descriptive landscape. But a lot of these page turner novels, they're just freaking screenplays, in my opinion. Just a lot of
Well, that's kind
dialogue.
of like yeah. So I've always that's in my prose I've always struggled with description, which is weird because I can
Well,
write
it's the hardest thing
poetry,
to do. You have
but
to really
like
get inside
but
your head.
dialogue comes easily to me though.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Well, Jem and I talked about this on the Voxer the other day, about having conversations with yourself, right?
yeah.
And the multiple personalities that we are. We are multiple personalities. And if
Right.
you think about it too much, it can get a little freaky, actually, right? And so dialogue, like, I don't think dialogue is that difficult, unless you're really unimaginative. But I dialogue with myself all the time.
Right.
So, and I'm not talking to the same person. It's not one person having a conversation, it's two people, definitely, two different people having a conversation. So, unfortunately.
You must have something that you must have some thoughts about dialogue,
Yeah.
Christina, having written plays.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to poetry for me, though. There's a, okay, who is this character? How do they speak? Forget myself.
Mm-hmm.
Let the character be born.
Kind of. And the more I try to control that, again, just like with a poem, the further south it goes.
Yeah.
You just, it like a poem, it kind of happens through you. The dialogue just happens. Obviously I talk to myself all the time, so
Yeah.
I'm sure that helps.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do you think though? Like when you're writing a poem, like I don't know, maybe some poems, I haven't really given it a lot of thought, but this is just off the top of my head. Like, is there a dialogue going on there, or is it a, I don't
It's at
know,
least
like it
a
doesn't really feel
monologue.
like a dialogue
In what?
in a
It-
poem.
Oh, I do. I think it is a dialogue. I think it's a dialogue with being.
Well, there's that, of course, yes, the
Yeah.
conversation with
Yeah.
being itself, but it's not like, yeah.
Well, there are actually some great poems that are written as dialogue too. Like, actually there's like in the T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, there's a whole bunch of different voices. Like it's almost all dialogue. It's like
Right.
a bunch of different voices in that poem.
Okay.
So
And the love
Yeah.
song of J. Alfred Prufrock is a prayer, I've realized.
oh, okay.
The love song from who?
The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot.
Oh,
Dare I
That-
eat a pea?
Did
I
you-
mean,
Did you know that?
I just did a bunch of reading, prepping for this, and I just kept seeing poems as prayer or prayers everywhere in a poem.
yeah.
There's a Kenny would know the answer to this because he's like the Uber Anglican, but there's actually like, oh, he's here now, so maybe you can tell me which version of the Book of Common Prayer did T.S. Eliot and C.S. Lewis combine to do the translation of the Psalter?
Okay, so this is an interesting fact. So they had translated certain, well, not translated, that's the wrong word. They had edited the Coverdale Psalter. The issue is this wasn't incorporated into fairly recently, if I remember correctly. I think the 79 was the first Book of Common Prayer to use the new Coverdale Psalter.
Okay, so
And
apparently he's
the
saying that
2019 one that the ACNA used.
that they basically revived the Coverdale Psalter, and that he says it first appeared in the 1979 version of the Book of Common Prayer. Like
But
that's what he-
obviously, plenty of people objected to the 79 because of its theological, trappings, and it was
So they edited it. What did they edit?
addition to the Book of Common
I don't know. You'd have to. That could be a conversation I have with Kenny. It was way more complicated than I realized when I just remember him telling me that interesting fact. But that's like I'm glad. I kind of wanted to bring that because it brings back to the Psalms, right?
Hmm.
So we can. I mean, we can't really talk about this like intersection between poetry and prayer without talking about the Psalms, because the Psalms are. I mean, they formed the earliest source of prayer really for the church, right? Like like praying the Psalms is like a very, very early Christian practice. It's been basically praying the Psalms has been a continuous Christian practice through multiple traditions.
Well, it's also been done in Judaism forever.
Right. And they're all poems.
Yeah, they're all poems.
They're all poems. So this connection is like, it's a pretty primary connection, and I can't help but think of like of Catherine Pickstock's argument in After Writing that like the purpose of language is liturgical,
Right.
which is why I think poetic diction is actually like it's so key, Shari, because like it is through poetic diction that that we will make the move to final participation. And
Well, it's the conversation with being.
and yeah, right, and to recover the Adamic language.
Yeah. Yeah.
And repair the world. So any closing thoughts from either of you?
Well, how about one more poem?
One more poem
Each. So
Okay.
Christina, have you got one?
Go ahead, Shari. I'll look.
Okay.
So look while you read. And
I have to look too. Just give me a second.
all right, I think I have whichever one of us finds one first.
Okay, I got one.
All right, go for it.
Has a title. Renewal. A slow breath, a small death. It lingers like the frosty droplets of air that emerge as I speak. As I speak out words that rise and fall and find wings. Who speaks? Who am I? Trampling the body and squeezing out the lifeblood. In one moment, I stop and listen. A still, small voice speaks. As I speak, it speaks, and I speak. I bend low, crawling through the moth-eaten deeds of my youth, brushing away tears. I see you, and you see me.
All right, Christina, are you ready or?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Sorry, after I hear a poem, I just need to kind of soak it in for a while. My dad mows the lawn, wipes the sweat that flows down his forehead with the back of his hand. His face is the tarnished brown of smoked salmon skin. He weaves around the statuary like an expert. From the lake, 100 bufflehead ducks hear him coming and take flight. He never wanted to be a man obsessed with a well-manicured lawn. He would rather be a chef or a painter, not this madman always running things over, cutting things down.
Oh, I love that.
Okay, so this poem was written kind of in response to a painting, Saint Columba bidding farewell to the white horse by Duncan. How far you came at the end of your journey, the once hot-headed young monk who before coming to Iona started a battle over the ownership of a psalter. You were no more the bold missionary who earned the respect of the fierce Brede and stared down the beast of Loch Ness and banished it by the sign of the cross. Worn down by time, weakened by age, you had allowed yourself to become soft. But in that softness was something even more potent, a gentleness so complete, even the beasts mourn your passing.
Nice.
Yeah. So, prayers are poems.
Mm-hmm.
Poems are prayers, and both are a communication with the ground of being. I think that's our a conversation. Yes, conversation is better than communication. Thank you. I got a conversation with being. Should that be the title?
Yeah.
A conversation with being. Poems and prayers, a conversation with being.
Yeah. Nice.
All right.
This was nice. Thank you
It
so
was.
much.
Thank you
It was really
guys
nice
both
to
so much. This was a
hear
fantastic
your poetry,
conversation.
Christina. I really loved it.
Oh, you're still out. Do you have poetry online?